Okay, so the clock is 12:30 Swedish time. Right in the lunch, we had, as I said, some people who was joining but then fell out. We can see if they will join again. So I keep just an eye on the attendance list here over here. But very welcome to this seminar that's called "This Place Has Meaning: The Heritage as a Method of Changing Communities." My name is Adam Norman. I work here at the Kalmar County Museum. Sorry, there's someone joining here. I work at Kalmar County Museum in Sweden, and I will have an eye on the technique and also the participants list to see which one is joining here, and also go through some of the practical details. And I will start with that one right now. Okay, just a quick question. Do you see my notes, or do you see the entire presentation? The presentation?
Yes.
Good. So this seminar is called Heritage as a Method for Changing Communities. And just some of the details, this session is recorded according to the Human Rights Days guidelines and will be made available after the seminar. The structure of the seminar is that we will have 4 different presentations here on 10 minutes each. On the first one, I will give a short summary of the method that is developed at Kalmar County Museum, and you will get 3 different examples on how it has been used globally after that one. Later on, we have some times for discussions and questions. And if there are any questions that comes to you during the presentations, feel free to write them in the chat here at Zoom, and we can handle those later on. And the people that you will see as presenters today, apart from me, is Tina Lindström, who is the head of the educational department at Kalmar County Museum in Sweden. It's Gulshera Khan, who's a social work manager and the president of Bridging Ages International, seated in South Africa, and Dr. Mildred Ayere from Maseno University and president of the Bridging Ages Kenya in Kisumu, Kenya. So that's the details. And I will start here with a very brief summary of the time travel method, which is a method developed at Kalmar County Museum, but used in many countries globally. But before we go into the method, we need to talk about heritage. And according to Oxford Dictionary, heritage is the history, traditions, buildings, and objects that a country or a society has had for many years and that are considered an important part of its character. That's one definition. So basically, old buildings, stone axes, and gold, the things that we can see at museums that are pointed out as something really important. But as heritage professionals, we can see heritage as much more than that. It's everyday objects. It's the computer screen that you're sort of staring at now. It's songs, traditions, dance. It's knowledge, viruses, a very recent heritage that forms today's society. And even life itself is a heritage. And heritage is always changing, and it's always created in the moment. So instead of seeing heritage just as objects or artifacts, we can see it as a process. It's something that we do in a group or as individuals. And it is the process where we sort of let time play a role in our lives. You can say that heritage is when traces from the past is activated in present time in order to affect the future. It's the past, the present, and the future interlinked. In some sense, this presentation is a heritage process because we are talking about things that has happened in order to affect something to happen in the future. Heritage happens all the time. It happens here, it happens now. And I guess that a very easy way to sort of show a heritage process is, you know, that colleague that says, it's a great idea, but we've never done it that way. Someone uses heritage in order to get their will forward. So heritage is a process. But what can we use this for? Now, in the time travel method, we use the past to address contemporary issues. When the method was started in the mid-1980s, the idea was to learn about history. Today, the idea is not to learn about history. It's a common misconception. Instead, we're working with contemporary issues and use heritage as sort of the motor, not the goal. And those contemporary issues, some topics that we are working with the time travel method could be xenophobia and racism, local democracy of many different types, environmental protection, forced removals, you will see an example of that one later on, land ownership, reconciliation process, gender equality and gender-based violence. The picture you can see here is from a time travel in Serbia, where we traveled back to 1944. So the time travel method, the definition goes like this: an educational method using local heritage in a learning process to create reflection on contemporary issues and provide tools of community building. The goal is to promote learning, social cohesion, and contribute to community building. And the how is that we activate local heritage in a role play in which the past, the present, and the future meets. And the role play is sort of used to give new perspectives, but also to create a safe space where everybody can speak their mind. The method lies on 5 different principles. The first one is the local site and story. We always use the local site and the stories that can be found here, because every site has a story or even several stories. By using this place, we can sort of transform it into something else. And quite often we just use an anonymous everyday site, a place that people know and maybe travels through every day but don't really think about. In some cases, we use a very famous site that still plays an important role today. And we always choose a site that is close to the participants in the target group, because that creates this sense of belonging and an engagement in the site. This time travel that you see in the picture is from Entebbe in Uganda, and the Freedom Tree, which was an important gathering point during the first stages of independence in the 1950s, where we have done some time travels. The second principle is the key questions. That's the thing linking the past to the present, something that connects the history of the place to the contemporary society. I mean, questions that are equally important then as today. Example of key question could be, how can we live together even though we are different? What is a good life? What traditions to keep? What traditions to leave? The third principle is the partnership, because we always team up with other organizations, working in collaboration, training local staff and volunteers, but also teaming up with the organizations that has the expert knowledge of the topic at hand, because we have a method and that need to be connected to a challenge in contemporary society, and someone has the specific knowledge of that one. The fourth principle is the different perspective. There is always a danger of one single story. So we need many different perspectives in order to tell different stories. We can't just, reenact or replay history from one perspective. We need many different perspectives to meet in the time travel. and open up for conflicting views. Because in this method, conflicting views can be shared, can be discussed, and can meet each other. Like this time travel in Finland during the Civil War. We have the both sides, the reds and the whites meeting, and we can't just tell one story. Because there is not one story to be told. There are several stories back, and there are several futures ahead of us. The fifth principle is the reflective dialogue. One very important part of this method is to get together to discuss in a safe space. And we do that by challenging participants to solve or to react to a historical scenario. And we are doing this in the role of historical people. I said before that this is a role play, and the role, the historical setting, is important parts in creating the safe space. With sort of the history as a disguise, we can discuss topics that are difficult today, like gender-based violence, like xenophobia. But if we talk about it in the past time, it's easier to come close to those topics. But of course, during time travel, we are always talking about present time because that's the thing that we got. So that's the 5 principles. The method is also divided into 2 parts. The process is sort of the part of the method where we are deciding the theme, finding an historical event or a historical site. We decide for the relevant key questions and issues addressed, and this could be very different depending on the target group, depending on the context. I mean, we are working with school children, we are working with university students, we are working with community, different communities, groups of professionals, and this process could be very, very different. But it's always a part of fact-finding, research, interviews, talking with people, find the different stories connected to the sites. And this is also the place where we want to involve stakeholders. I mean, who needs to be addressed in a time travel like this? Is it the decision makers? Is it the politicians? Is it the teachers if we're working with schools? What organizations are in the area that works with similar topics? Involve stakeholders. The process then leads up to the scenario. And the scenario is when the site, the historical site that we have chosen, the historical facts, and the key questions are put together into one fictional story. And we are very open with that this is a fictional story. I mean, we can't recreate history. Never. It's a fictional story. It's based on historical facts, of course, but it's always a fictional story. And the scenario should be written so that it opens up for conflicting views, that there are problems to solve in this story. There's no real open solution because that's up to the participants to find that. And the scenario is used as a framework during the time travel event, which is the next part. It's not a manuscript, it's not a theater, so it's not lines or something like that. It just sets the frame for the role play. It's built up a bit like a drama, so we have the beginning, the middle, and the end, of course. And there are often a few special roles, like the one you see here. That's a scenario from the southern part of Tanzania, where we had a scenario on the coming of the first Christian missionaries in the late 1800s and how that affected norms, tradition, and values. But most people just play ordinary people in the historical time as well. This all leads up to the time travel event. And as you have seen, people are sometimes in historical clothing. And this is the role play drama of the historical event, where all the participants travel back in time. That's why we call it the time travel method. We change the name, change the clothes, go back in time, and create the safe space to sort of meet, discuss, learn. And we do that as someone else. There are different activities during the event linked to the scenario, and that's because it makes discussion easier if you have something for your hands. And at the end of the time travel, we travel forth in time to present day, reflect on what has happened in the course of time and what we want for the future, and sort of set the way forward for our group, for our community. So that's the very basic idea of the time travel method. You will get some examples later on here. I'm just going to present Bridging Ages International because there is an international organization supporting the use of the time travel method. The organization has everything from individuals to museums and NGOs and universities as members. The office is in Kalmar, Sweden. For the moment, the president is based in South Africa, and the international board is has participants from many different countries, and there are local branches in several countries. So with that, I'm leaving over to Tina Lindström, who will give you an example on a time travel in Sweden.
Thank you, Adam. See now, can you see the screen now?
With notes?
Can you see the screen?
Yes, but with notes? With your notes?
With my notes, okay.
Yes.
I will change that in a minute. So what about now? Is it okay now?
The same as it was.
Really? Oh. See if I can. That was bad. And now? Is it okay now?
Not yet, Tina. Just try.
This is not good. Can't understand why I'm doing the same.
Come to the...
Växla mellan föredragshållning, eller hur Adam? Adam?
Ja, det stämmer. Klicka där.
Det är fortfarande fel.
Nej, jag ser ingen skillnad.
Vad tråkigt.
Do you still see the...
You can still see my notes. Jag trycker på den där växeln mellan föredragshållningsfil och bildspel. Och ändå blir det fel.
Testa en gång till. Det bara fryser.
Fryser det?
Mm.
Så dumt.
Vad händer om du trycker på duplicera bildspel?
Nu?
Nej, nu ser vi ingenting.
Nu ser ni ingenting. Ja, men det här var det som inte skulle hända.
Now we can see everything correctly.
Yes.
But you're on the second slide.
I know. So how do I do this? And, Nu kan jag inte se min egen, vet du, mina...
Yeah.
I can't see my own notes now, which is really bad. Hip.
But if you need to see your own notes, I think that it's possible for all of us to see. I mean, we don't need to read your notes even if we can see them. It's okay.
Is it okay?
Just to, to keep on going.
Yeah. But now you can't. I can't see my notes. You see.
Exactly. So do it once again and go back to where you were.
Oh well. I can't even see where the top is. Oh, well, I'll do it again. I'm very sorry for this. But this is how it happens sometimes.
Adam, I have put a question, but I will not be able to stay on for the whole seminar since I have another seminar to attend to. But anyway, I go back later and read if this says.
Absolutely, and everything will be available, recorded and available after the seminar as well. I think it's a very interesting question. Tror du att du kan köra utan anteckningar, Tina?
Ja, jag får göra det. Men det känns inte bra. Alls, måste jag säga. När vi har prövat det här så många gånger, jag förstår inte det. Vänta lite, ska vi se. Jag fattar inte vad det är som är fel alltså. Okay. So, okay, I have a go on this. This is my screen is all messy, but I will do my best. I'm Tina, and I will make an example of a time travel. And we are going back to 1945. And here is the facts. Towards the end of the World War II, people in Sweden started to realize that the concentration camps existed, but nobody had an idea of the proportions. And Folke Bernadotte and the Red Cross from Sweden made an agreement with Heinrich Himmler in Berlin in spring 1945. Buses and boats from Sweden were sent to Germany to save people from the concentration camps and bring them to Sweden for treatment. And one of the first days in May, the first concentration camps came and arrived to Kalmar by boat, just outside where the Kalmar Läns Museum is today, which is quite fantastic, I would say. And here is the boat. It was called Prince Carl. Came, and the citizens of Kalmar were greeted them, and they were quite shocked when the refugees arrived because they were in so poorly conditions. They were very ill and sick. There were 298 refugees who arrived to Kalmar in 1945. And they were brought, most of them, to hospitals, of course, and an epidemic hospital in Kalmar by that time, in Linde. And we decided to make a time travel out of this, and the goal was to make an educational program that will open up for discussion on a sensitive issue, to understand the Swedish and the Kalmar connection to refugees from the past and comparison today. And the target group we chose was participants from the annual Bridging Ages Conference in Kalmar 2016. And the scenario was in May 45. The war was over, but we will in a week greet refugees from the Nazi concentration camps who will arrive by boat to Kalmar in Sweden, and the organization Red Cross. So the Red Cross is asking for volunteers' help in the receiving of the victims from the concentration camps, and this very morning several persons have arrived at the epidemic hospital in Kalmar to offer their help. And some are very concerned. Can we take care of all these victims? Will there be problems and cost and religion discussions and so on? And there is always a plan for the day, and the time plan was to prepare the site. And then the participants will arrive and they will get dressed up with costumes and they will get road cars and so on. and they will be divided into groups. And then there will be a presentation of the time travel. The scenario will be presented. And there were rules for the time travel. No cell phones, no mobiles, no discussions about present time and so on. And there will also be an initiation. And that in nations it will be very important to start the day, the time travel. There will be activities in different groups. There will be discussions, and sometimes there will be an interrupted action, like one person will come into the scenario and do something, enter the scene, and there will be discussions about that and problems to solve or whatever. And there will be a clear ending, and we will wait for the boat, of course. And after the time travel, there is always this reflection, as Adam mentioned. The learning part, what have we done? What have we been through? What can we compare of today and for the future? So the arrivals came and they got roll cards, all of them, and costumes like this. And they were prepared to lead the group. Some of them were leading the time travels as nurses and doctors and caretakers. And we have discussions through the time travel, of course. Key questions, as we call them. They are very important for the time travel. Like this time we choose guilt. I did not know anything about the concentration camps. And maybe I didn't want to know anything about them. And am I to blame, to be blamed if there was problems and what happened to all these peoples in the camps? We choose solidarity. How far reaches our solidarity? How many refugees can we take care of? Can we even take care of Germans? And we choose diversity. Most of the refugees are different, of course, different religions, language, traditions. Do they fit into our society? And the volunteers came, they got new clothes, they got rope cards, and opportunities, and activities to lead. The scenario was presented. One group was therapeutic talks. When the refugees arrived, they were in poorly conditions. They were badly affected, and physically and in whatever, trauma, shocks, and so on. So we were talking about how could we take care of that. Another group was bandage and medicine, and if we could help them with in physical conditions. Another group was taking care of their laundries, clean their clothes and give them new clothes. And another group was about teaching Swedish. Maybe there were professionals, teachers in the volunteer group. Maybe they could lead it. How can you teach Swedish in a very easily way? Some of the refugees probably are children, and how can we prepare them for joy and fun with mending old toys and knitting and sewing and things like that. And of course, there is always food in a time travel. Tea and coffee and sandwiches, and good talks, and good discussions. When we do something with our hands, it's easier to talk. And it's also good for the reflection part. 2015, Sweden got 160,000 refugees to Sweden in a very short time. This was a big challenge for Sweden. Most of them came through Malmö. It's a big city, south part of Sweden. And actually it was the same problems, how to deal, and reflections from the Swedish people. Are we able to take care of all this? Will there be problems? How can we cope with this, and how we're going on? Will they fit into the Swedish society, all these people? So, I will end my presentation with a big question. Can we do a time travel back to 2015? Can we use the same questions, the same key questions as we did 45? And how can we use history and learn through history to solve problems of today, but also for the future? Thank you very much. And I will pass forward to Mildred, I think it is, and also, no, it's Gulshera. Pass forward to Gulshera, and hopefully you will have better luck with your presentation than I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Looks good.
Is this a PowerPoint? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm on. Thank you very much. My name is Kushira. I'm from South Africa. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
But something happened to my computer, and it's. I just go back quickly. How do I end that? Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. But it is. Yes, today my focus is to give you a practical example of the experiential approach to time travel. In all our time travels, we are always learning through doing. That is the use of the 5 senses, which is sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. In order for us to address issues of today, in a time travel, we always go back to the past. South Africa is only 27 years in its democracy. The 27 years is a very short period in comparison to the centuries of injustice, human rights violation, and abuse. And all this have led to the destruction of the fundamental fabric of family life. We are faced with the centuries of oppression. And when I talk about centuries, it's about 300 years or more, and deliberate denial of basic rights, dignity, and self-worth. In 1994, we had our first democratic election. And you would see on my left, Nelson Mandela has been our first president during democracy. After democracy, a country that had been ruined as South Africa. It was necessary to rebuild and reconstruct our country. The priority areas and were roads, housing, sanitation, clean water, and of course other facilities and resources like libraries and communities, schools, yes, bus shelters, yes, transport, good roads. But what remained and what still is a psychosocial trauma. And this probably would take centuries, and it needs to be addressed. And how do we address this? It will be through programs and discussions. And one of the programs we use in Bridging Ages is the time travel method. The healing is very important, actually, for the present generation, and for this not to be transferred to the next generation. Today in South Africa, we are faced with a very angry society. The picture on your right is of a recent incident. In media, people openly display racism. There's a road rage, sporadic incidents of xenophobia, and this is ongoing because of their high unemployment rate. Protest action and destruction of properties. Actually, 2 weeks ago, an NGO, the entire office was destroyed, including the vehicle, because they were protesting for water. There are questions of land issues. I can't go into details of this, but it is, you can Google the issue of land of South Africa and the problems associated with this. There is increased economic inequality, and the gap is widening between the rich and poor. Actually, our statistics and research shows this as well. COVID-19 pandemic has increased this anger. There's high unemployment, service delivery issues, and the economic hardships continue. Now, how do we use the time travel method to address the present and the future? How do we take the past? Because the past has been quite negative. One of the laws in the 1950s was the Group Areas Act. The Group Areas Act basically segregated people in terms of racial groups. The good land and the majority of the land had been allocated to one race group, and only 7% of the land was reserved for the majority, that is the Black South Africans. Over 3.5 million people were forcefully removed based on the color of the skin. They were allocated which transport to use, which beach to attend to, which shopping areas they could shop. And we had something that called curfew at 8 o'clock at night or 9, I'm not sure. It was different in different municipal areas or towns. There was a curfew. Any person beyond that time that was a Black South African would have been arrested. People have resisted for decades. They were either jailed and sometimes not even known up to today what has happened to them. The township that was developed, which is my focus today, is called Gamalaka, where forceful removals took place overnight. Now, the images that I show you here today are not from Gamalaka. It was similar. It are images of another area called Cater Manor, and these are from a museum that is based in a city, Durban. We had undertaken research and we wanted to locate a time travel site in the township Gamalaka. We have done oral history recording, and the time travel is based on Smangela Memela's oral history recording. We had gone into the National Archives, and there were little information that could be found on the removal of people from Gamalaka, from cities and different areas to Gamalaka. The information we could find to collaborate, because the information that we have to put down to learners, we have to be highly responsible, must be authentic. So we found information in local newspaper. but it was from the perspective of the municipality about the removal of people. This is house number 258. It is a tin. This is an actual measurement which I have undertaken. I measured the tin. 2 families were accommodated in this tin, less than 20 square meters. The time travel site is a story of Mangele Memela when she was 11 years old. And in 1968, she was 11. And this is how it starts. We heard stories, rumors about people, that Black South African people were taken away from their home and placed in unknown areas. We never imagined that this would also happen to us. I still ask myself the question, why? As a child, you failed to really understand. There were no answers given by my mother, Bonnie, because she said, we should not ask questions. We must just follow the rules if we want to be safe. The day arrived in October 1968. We heard people shouting that we must take our belongings and get into the truck. We were not given enough time to pack. It was all very rushed. We did not know. And this story is recorded and documented. We continued with research with 50 others, and the stories are quite similar. The time travel is based on this story at this site, at the same tin house. It is used for education and commemoration of Human Rights Day. The time travels is linked to the school curriculum on human rights. It is actually across, it can be actually across all subject areas. Here at this site, when this family, the Memela family, moved to this tin, on another day, another family was just dumped by a municipal vehicle. And this is the start of the time travel, where Bonnie, the mother of Mangele Memela, could not refuse another mother with her 3 children. So they were accommodated at that tin. The goals of the time travel is linked to the outcomes to be achieved. And every time travel, we have to be highly responsible. At the end of the time travel, what Adam mentioned, as well as Tina, we call reflective dialogue, where there's a discussion that takes place of what had just transpired. Here we have generally, if it is a time travel based on the school curriculum, it's the educator, the teacher that will continue the discussion, and that discussion continues in the classroom. There's a gentleman seated, and to boost the self-esteem of learners, we would normally have people from within the same community, and he was manager. He's an educator, manager of many schools, and he tells his story to the learners where there is interaction taking place. In every time travel of human rights violation, we have to be careful not to reinforce social hatred. In such time travels, we should anticipate and be fully prepared. Questions of learners must be answered. There must also be debriefing. Perhaps experts and enough time should be spent on reflecting. Very often in such time travel, the feelings continue. And this is why it is so important to have the multidisciplinary approach, have a social worker, a counselor on standby. while this is so, it is very important that we restore the dignity and respect the victims. And in all our time travels and recording of their stories, we say the victim comes first. There should be consultation, the space respected, and even counseling. And this goes towards the healing. This has to be carefully managed. The Memela Family Home is a time travel site for education, celebration of Human Rights Day, and even tourism. It's also a learning site where we have taken students from tertiary education to the site about how to assist in building this community. Some of the psychological benefits of such time travel is boosting of one's image and self-worth. It promotes healing of past wounds. When people together sit around, you don't even need a counselor, and talk about the issues. There's a sense of belonging and identity. In the time travel that was undertaken in Gamalaka, the slides that you've seen with the learners, all those learners were from the same community. And there was a huge sense of belonging after we had discussions during reflection. This time travel contributes towards community cohesion, but I will go further and say social cohesion. People of different race groups are brought in to experience this, to have a better understanding of what transpired and how can we work together in harmony for the future. It also promotes unity. I thank you. I now hand over to Mildred from Kenya.
Thank you, Gulshera. I'm presenting a time travel event about gender-based violence. This was presented with Maseno University students in 2019. My presentation is based on 4 areas. The students' resolutions that made them undertake this particular time travel. Just to understand the context, I will talk about the gender-based violence types and then the statistics in Kenya before I get to the time travel itself, so that we get the context of why this is a problem in Kenya. The resolutions that brought out this were when students talked and felt like gender-based violence is actually a violation of human rights, and that each one of us must act to end gender-based violence, and that each of our voices needed to be heard, and we need to stand against gender-based violence. The types of gender-based violence experienced in Kenya, we have sexual violence. This is with intimate partners in form of rape, sexual assault, harassment. Then there's physical violence like wife beating, the case our time travel today is based on. Emotional and psychological violence, that is like sex for marks in our universities. Harmful traditional practices common in Kenya like forced marriages, FGM, and so on. Then we have socioeconomic violence, denial of opportunities, and services based on demand for sex. This is grave in Kenya. You find that 45% and 44% of men between 15 and 49 have experienced physical violence. Then 14% of women between 15 to 49 years have experienced sexual violence. 40% of women experience intimate partner sexual violence, and 22% of women have been forced into child marriages. 21% of women and girls experience female genital mutilation. And so we feel this really is grave and action needs to be taken. So the time travel itself took place in Maseno University, as you can see our gate. Why the time travel method? It provides a safe space to talk. There people can discuss intimate things that they would not find difficult to talk about in real life. Culture we saw is really just used to justify gender-based violence and inequality. And therefore, there's need to relook at our cultural practices as a people in Kenya. In this particular event, the local site was a traditional homestead. The story was about wife beating as a traditional practice in the Luo culture. What was the goal? The goal was to affirm the fact that gender-based violence is a violation of human rights and action needs to be taken against perpetrators. Our key questions in this particular was, what are the causes of gender-based violence? How does heritage, that is dowry payment, gender roles, economic dependence contribute to gender-based violence? What cultural practices must we live for a violence-free community in terms of gender? How can gender-based violence be stopped in this country and in our institutions? Can gender-sensitive issues be solved without violence? And lastly, what is our responsibility as individuals and as a country? This forms the basis of our interactions during the time travel event. The activities taken were family calls, abusing, a role play of an abusive husband, weaving of baskets by grandmothers, playing of board games, playing active games, and caring for animals by the older boys. Then this therefore led us into reflective dialogue and conclusion. And in this, we were saying, in terms of culture, we were able to feel, we were feeling that there are cultural practices that must stop so that the community allows individual rights. And this brought out another issue about value education. And this came out that gender-based violence is not cultural. And the students were saying that it is criminal and a violation of fundamental human rights, and the perpetrators therefore need to be brought to book. And finally, that there's need to stop gender-based violence, and it must start with me before it gets into the wider community. That was the affirmation of students of Maseno University. So you can see this was the site. Agluo Homestead was the site of the time travel. These were the people at the initiation ceremony as the time travel was just starting. There were traditional dances, and at reflective dialogue, I think all of us have continued to say that there's always time to reflect, there's always time to agree, and this was part of that reflective dialogue. I hope with this we get a feeling of how time travel can help us tackle the present day issues that affect us. And this was really, we chose the traditional home as a site because we needed the students to talk, reflecting on the past, allowing them to speak about the different types of violence they are facing as university students today. If we put it at university, they would shy away, but in a traditional setting, they felt safe to talk and to discuss the issues. Thank you very much. I must end here, and I'm asking if there are questions, then we could discuss if there are questions. I'm not sure if Adam has been keeping a tab on the chat.
No, I think we have got some questions in the chat, and I think we start with Åsa Henriksson. She says here, it would be interesting to hear about follow-up, what has happened afterwards, its outcome on different levels, participants, community level, etc. And I think I could maybe pass that to Mildred, because you are working quite closely with the students and the close community. So the outcome and follow-up.
Actually, it's been interesting that besides that time travel, later on when we went back into the university, we had two different teams of students, a group at the main campus and a group at the city campus, and we were able to sit with them and discuss based on the contemporary gender-based violence issues currently practiced within their setting as university students. And you won't believe there was so much. And we realized, yes, in Kenyan universities, there's as much as it's a place where people are supposed to be very free, there's a lot of suppression based on sexual advances, either from colleagues or lecturers or the wider community, the elderly who offer money to support the young girls and the young boys in exchange for sex. So it is a real thing, and we keep using these chances to get a chance to talk and to take action where we are able to. Thank you, Adam.
Just thinking maybe Tina in Kalmar, where we worked with this method for quite a long time. Can you give some perspective on the follow-up and the long term? Unmute mikrofonen.
Yes, we do time travels about 100 to 120 every year with students all around our region. And sometimes, you know, since I've been working quite a lot, many years with this method, I meet students from university today, and they remember the time travel they did when they were 9 years old. And they remember what their name was and what they had for food, and quite a lot of more of the activities. So I would say this method is very strong. It sits in your body, and you will remember it for life. of course, not all of the students will do this, but some of them will, and also reflect on their the local heritage, the site we have been to. You know, that people perhaps for 6,000 years back in time has lived actually on this place, on this site, just nearby the school. It's quite a reflection that sits in your body.
I think also if you want to pose a question with audio, it's okay as well.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting method. I have not heard of this, but I've been working long time with different non-violence methods, and to me there has a lot of connection with this. So my question is if you are working with other civil society actors, and if so, in what way? Now this is a very broad question, and I know we are out of time. So just if you have I'm sure you do, so just if you have a few examples, it would be nice to hear. Thank you.
Maybe I could answer that. In all of the time travels that we have mentioned now, it's a basic idea of the time travel to collaborate with other organizations as well, because you can't be alone if you want to change norms and attitudes and behaviors. So absolutely, we're working with civil society organizations, we're working with faith-based organizations, universities. It all depends on the local context, basically. So the short answer, because of the lack of time, yes. Talking about the follow-up, we have some reports from different projects. We had researchers from Linnaeus University follow the project in Uganda. I can send you that dissemination report if you're interested.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Also that we have done time travels back in time, 6,000 years back in time, or the 15th century, or whatever. But we also have done time travels to the future. And that is together with the university, Linnaeus, here in Kalmar, which is quite interesting, and involve teenagers in this project. And actually, after the time travel, they said, well, this is an important issue because I will live in the future. 50 years was in this case we traveled to. So I believe very much in this method. As it is a role play, you're not yourself. You can be free to say and talk and feel and have opinions of whatever, which is good.
Adam, can I say something? Yeah, just to say that in Kenya, in the past, we worked with the Kenya Human Commission for Peace and Human Rights, because we really needed them to help us get to the government offices that we needed to work with, the Peace Commission. So yes, it is true, we work with human rights bodies as an organization of bridging ages. Yes.
I know that we're out of time, but I mean, since you're still here, we have a question from Sigrid Bergfeldt, who had another seminar, but since we are recording, I think that maybe we can just elaborate on her question. She writes in the chat, to ensure different perspectives, the invitation of participants is crucial. Then power relations are crucial to take into consideration. Please share experience of how this has been handled, positive and negative. Gulshera, could you maybe say something about that, the involvement of the participants and also the power relations?
Yes, we have done time travels with schools, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into a time travel. Educators and the learners working together. But during the time travel event, there is no educator. You're not the educator. You're an ordinary participant. and the learner is a learner in that specific period in time. And I think this is the positive, where the learners can express themselves freely. They're not in the present, but they are in the past. And I think it helps with what you have just mentioned, power relationships. I think that's the positive. And what we found from our experience after a time travel, even when they get back into the present, the relationship seemed to have been more open and kind of improved, where even the shy learner is able to open up and have discussions. So it is carefully managed. Thank you. Yeah?
Anyone else in the group wants to elaborate on Sigrid's question, the question of involving the participants? Otherwise, I can say something. As I mentioned, one part of the method is the process in which we involve different stakeholders, but that's of course also the participants. And it's important that we involve them both in the planning and execution, the actual time travel event, but also to get the facts, because there are many different ways to see a conflict or a recent event. And in that case, we need to involve them. Sometimes we travel so long time back in time, so we can't really involve someone who has a first-hand experience. But the participants, I mean, everything starts with their interest and their issues of today. I think Mildred, you were starting to say something.
I was saying that indeed it is true, involving participants is important, and the types of participants. That's why as a university, for instance, we work not only with university students, but occasionally we involve secondary school students, because our university students feel they can be agents of change. And as a result, after we are through with the time travel, they find an opening into the schools and can tackle contemporary issues affecting secondary school students, like drug addiction and such like vices that as students of university, they have already passed through and understand what the secondary school students are going through, therefore are able to help them and hold their hands. And occasionally we bring in religious leaders, human rights organizations or civil society organizations, especially when we are dealing with the post-election violence. We really needed to work with the police. We needed to work with the other civil society organizations in Kisumu so that we could do a good time travel.
Just to add also that these safe spaces that we are creating, the safe spaces are very important. I think what we say in this room during this time travel, it will stay in this room. So you can feel free to talk. And that is really good if you're working with different religion issues or political issues and so on, that you are able to say something and people will listen to you in this safe space.
And also that to give a voice to those who don't always have a voice or a part in a decision-making process and things like that.
Yes.
It's a
children and adults and so on.
Okay, we have a new question from Åsa. Have you experienced any particular challenges with a certain time travel? That's also a very open question.
Yes, I could put it more specific. I mean, if there are certain topics, I can imagine that certain topics, it can become very sensitive. for example, with gender-based violence, I can imagine that in certain circumstances it's difficult. It's more if you have certain experiences like that and how you have handled it, because I can imagine that you cannot plan for everything normally. So what you have done when those challenges have appeared, and also with people having traumas themselves, when they, even if you enter a role play, the trauma, you can face your own trauma in the play because you can. I'm asking this because I have own experiences from other types of workshops, so to speak, where people have had come in with trauma. We haven't been aware about it, and then during the workshop, the trauma has been appearing, and that is one example which I can give, and I can imagine that there has been similar challenges you have faced.
True. I can say that especially with the gender-based violence, and that's why after that we held several follow-up sessions, because students were opening up, not immediately in the time travel, but one specific one broke down. And because we felt there could be an issue, we shielded the girl and allowed the time travel to run to an end. But later on, me and my colleague, the lecturer, we sat down with her and we talked. And she was a case that had been violated within the university. So really, when you deal with this kind of issues, you run into unexpected. And I think what it opened our eyes to what is actually happening within the university. Even others came up and started talking about the sex for marks issues. We didn't know it was so rampant within the university, but we got to learn. And suddenly you're faced with a challenge that you don't know where to take. And at some time we go to the students' welfare and try to seek direction.
Yeah, can I add something?
Absolutely.
Also, that it is so important that we work together with other organizations or whatever, so that are skilled in if it is a sensitive issue. For example, if we work with elderly care, we always work with staff from the elderly care homes, because we know history and culture heritage, but we are not good in nursing and skilled in those kind of issues. So we always work together with partners that are skilled in different matters that for the topic for the time travel, and that is important.
So I think that we've all, I mean, that's always a problem or challenge when you're working with change. Mm-hmm. That sometimes you enter a situation which is sensitive. The time travel method, it's not a quick fix, of course. It's a good method for handling those type of sensitive issues, but we always need to have sort of a backup. We work with local partners that can be with the group afterwards, even if it's a teacher, if it's a school context, or the elders in a village if we're out in a local community. So we need to anchor it with those in order to handle the things that can come up to the surface, because it opens up this method. And it's a very interesting question, and I guess that you have some experience as well of things that are not going as planned, maybe, or becoming too challenging. It's always difficult. Okay, we have taken some time over the schedule, but I think that we got to answer all the questions. Kerstin has left here, and some others as well. But do we have any final questions now? If not, you can find in the details of this event at the Human Rights Day's site, you can find contacts to the four of us, as well as the website of Bridging Ages, which is the international organization organizing time travels in different countries globally. So with that, I just want to thank all the panelists and the participants for this session. And I hope that we maybe see each other somewhere, sometime, on a screen or in real life one day. So thank you so much.